welcome. It's our Confessions podcast. That's what this is. An audio array of terrible tales from the extraordinarily sinful Radio 2 listeners. This week's concise collection includes some astonishing alien antics, a pulverised pottery prank, a fishy frolic, and a catastrophic car calamity. Who will you forgive? Here it all comes. The Venerable Dedicate has joined us today.
A very, very good evening.
It's good drama, though, isn't it?
Yes.
On your piece of paper, which you're about to take notes of, you've already written no forgiveness. So, I mean, I don't... Can you just wait until you hear the story?
Oh, very well, very well.
Don't prejudge anyone.
No, as if.
Tonight's confession comes from Chrissy. Thank you very much indeed. A nice memento of tonight's confession, which is called Practice What You Preach. Is on our Facebook page. Dear Father Simon and the Forgiving Few, I seek forgiveness for a sin I committed a few years ago, which has been plaguing on my mind for some time. I was at the time the general manager of a small family company. Back then we employed about 10 drivers who used a canteen in a small block of offices. When in any of the offices, you could hear the drivers' banter coming from the canteen. Talk of football, beer, trucks and women filled the air. One driver, we'll call him Mitch, was totally obsessed with food. At this particular time, he was enthralled by the fantastic offers available from a recently opened German discount food retailer in the town. I'll keep it vague. Every day you could hear him twittering on about the latest bargain him or his wretched wife had found in that supermarket. Cheese for 10p, tins of beans for 2p, wine for £1.25. The list went on and on. One particular bargain Mitch had found was very much a favourite. A small tin of peaches for 5 pence.
Wow.
Each day he would bring in his lunch, put it in the fridge ready for the afternoon, and every day for about 3 weeks we put up with him going on and on about cheap tin peaches. So one day I just snapped. I had to do something about it to shut him up. On my way out to the office, I recovered from the bin the empty peaches tin. It was the type with a stick-on wrap-around label. And off to a high-end supermarket I went. I wandered the tin fruit aisles until I found what I was looking for. The perfect product in the exact same size tin with a stick-on label. At home, I carefully steamed off both labels and affixed the peaches label to the new product. The next morning, Mitch arrived in as normal, placed his lunch, including his wretched peaches, in the fridge, and after another round of praising the German retailer, went off on his deliveries. The canteen was empty. The tins were swapped, and all I had to do was wait. Lunchtime arrived, and a good number of drivers and other staff were in the canteen. I was listening from the office next door. Michael ate his sandwiches and reached in for his 5p tin. Shock, horror, rang around the canteen as he opened it. "What is this?" came the cry of disgust. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. Nobody knew what was in his tin, but it certainly wasn't peaches. The tin sat in the middle of the table, and at first nobody dared to touch it. The label was examined, the sell-by date checked, the contents prodded with a spoon. Not peaches. The drivers all decided it looked like the heads of baby aliens, about the size of golf balls, the same yucky green colour as an avocado, covered in large scales, and eyes and a nose. It smelt of cabbage. Can you guess what it is?
Lychee? No. Wrong colour.
I could not leave the next door office for fear of giving the game away. The canteen discussion continued. Mitch was distraught. What could have happened? Had the canning plant been taken over by aliens? Clearly.
Yeah, that's definitely number one on the list. Yeah.
Tinned aliens.
Yeah. That's going to be their fine.
Mitch decided he would take them back to the shop for a refund of 5 pence and complain to the manager. But he would have to wait until after work. He put the tinned aliens under the sink, as he didn't want to contaminate the fridge, and all the drivers continued with their day's work. I couldn't let him take the aliens back to the shop, so when the coast was clear, I got the tin from the sink and disposed of the solid part of the contents and replaced the tin under the sink with just the brine in. This turned out to be a very bad idea, because when Mitch came back to collect his tin, he freaked out and genuinely said, "They've all escaped!" What? A frantic search followed. More and more people joined in until most of the workforce were hunting for the escaped aliens, some with bits of plywood in hand and with which to hit the little blighters with if they could find them. Calling the police or the RSPCA or the German government was suggested, but I managed to calm the situation down, saying that nobody would believe we'd found baby aliens in a tin of peaches.
No.
Mitch did take the empty tin back to the shop, but without the contents, it must have been a very strange conversation. I think the manager gave him 5p just to get him out of the shop, as you can imagine. Over the months, the aliens have become part of company folklore. Mitch changed supermarkets and has stuck to branded goods thereafter. I've kept this secret until today, but the next time you're in the tin aisle of a high-end supermarket, have a look for artichoke hearts. They really do look like baby alien heads and cost considerably more than 5p. Father Simon asked forgiveness for the bewildered shop manager and from all the people in the canteen who from that day open a tin with trepidation and fear of what they might find inside. No aliens were harmed in the making of this confession. Thank you very much indeed, Chrissy. Who'd have thought it? So much fun could be had with a tin of artichoke hearts.
I like the way that Mitch, rather than thinking they might have been something like artichoke hearts, obviously thought they were aliens.
Well,
aliens'
well,
heads, no less.
Yes.
Yes.
With
So
little
Mitch,
with little noses and
obviously
scales.
not that bright, maybe. That might have been
saying he's
an
thick?
issue. No,
Thick
no,
Mitch.
but I'm just saying that I wouldn't have jumped to the aliens conclusion. Not many would, I think. So I think it was a harmless joke, and it can be annoying when people go on and on about bargains.
5p peaches.
5p peaches, yeah. So I think, Chrissy, you're completely forgiven.
What do you say, venerable dedicote?
I agree. Actually, on this occasion, I did write no on my sheet of paper. You're absolutely right. But the story of aliens in brine did appeal to me as a way of combating a peach bore. Very elaborate way of doing it, though. Congratulations for pulling it off, actually,
Yes.
Chrissy. Well done. It was superbly done. It got into company folklore, and it'll teach him to stick with branded goods, won't it? So, on that basis alone, I think forgiven.
You're never going to get invited for jury service, are you? Because you're just walking with a piece of paper.
Do you know, I've
that says
never
guilty.
been invited for jury
Definitely
service.
guilty.
Definitely not.
Brother Matthew.
Send him down. When the aliens...
will you?
Yeah, I will. When the aliens do come, they will inevitably launch their takeover via tinned food, won't they? Obviously.
It's like War of the Worlds, isn't it? That's where they're
exactly,
lurking.
yes. That's H.G. Wells had that in mind,
It would
didn't
be
he?
scary, though, if you
Yes.
opened a tin and,
Yes, and
just
there would
imagine
be the
it.
aliens coming out.
And they jumped out.
Or we could stop the invasion by not opening the tin. Complete thing foiled. Also, though, I can't be doing with people who are going on about bargains. Oh, we can't go wrong with this. Only 2 for a £5. Really? All you want to do is get big praise from me for you hunting out a bargain. Well, no more. No more, I
How the
say.
other half live? How the other
Yes,
half live?
yes, indeed. So I'm going to say... forgiven, I think. Is that? Yeah. Yeah, let's go with
Something
that.
like that.
Yeah.
The venerable dedicote is back in, and he's already prejudged. He always makes his decision before he actually even comes in. You could just email in your answer, Alan, really, couldn't you?
All I've said is maybe.
Maybe, okay.
Maybe.
all right. Rather than guilty, as yesterday.
Very good
Guilty
evening
as
to you.
charged.
Very good evening.
So here we have tonight's tale from Roger. Roger, thank you very much indeed for tonight's story. Dear Father Simon and the ever-forgiving collective. My confession takes us back to the year 2003 when I was a young secondary school pupil. Like most other teenage pupils, I fought to be part of the social elite. There was no better time to achieve this status than in Mr. Brown's art lessons, which was essentially 2 hours of meaningless chat with the cool kids. Unfortunately, I was somewhat challenged in the creative department and had no real interest in art at all. When it came to the dreaded parents' evening, and there sat Mr. Brown with an unforgiving look on his face. He'd already previously stated his disliking to my out-of-season snowmen, so I knew that this was not going to go well. He started by stating the obvious. Roger, he said, is rather struggling with art, and then came the terrifying threat. If he doesn't improve, I'll have no option but to move him into German instead. Anything but German. I thought it's full of boffins and geeks. Mr. Brown went on to add, your son is the worst example of an artist I've ever seen, and if he takes art classes next year, I will seriously have to consider early retirement. I didn't think you were allowed to say things like that. But anyway,
I did German.
I would... very good. I expect your answer, Auf Deutsch. I would have hardly called it early retirement, seeing that he appeared to be in his 90s. But anyway, it was all a bit dramatic, but I got the gist. Shape up, or I'd be shipped out. Over the next month, I managed to stumble my way through art classes by passing off friends' draft work and sketches as my own final product. I would put a few additional scribbles and a Picasso-like signature at the bottom and claim it was abstract art. I could tell Mr. Brown was becoming wise to my scheme, and I was running out of time. But as a gift from the social gods, pottery was introduced to our lessons. Surprisingly to me and my friends, and certainly Mr. Brown, I appeared to have a natural talent for clay work. Over the next few weeks, I managed to construct a pot that Demi Moore would have been proud of, which I stored in a metal cabinet specifically assigned for our class. We wrote our names on the pots so there would be no confusion over the owner when taking them out. Our first lesson was in the morning, so we would store our pots in the cabinet during lunch and come back to them afterwards. One week I had sporting commitments and so was unable to attend art class. So when I walked in the following week, I expected my pot to be buried at the bottom of the cabinet. I was shocked to find that it had been stolen. Vanished. I started racing around the room in a panic, looking high and low until I saw it. There it was, right before my own eyes. Tiffany Jenkinson had stolen it and was passing it off as her own work. She was at that moment showing it to Mr. Brown, making sure that he knew it was hers. There was no way I could just steal it back. That's just what Mr. Brown wanted, proof that I wasn't actually any good at pottery. It was a conspiracy to make me take German and ruin my social life. So having just watched and been inspired by Enemy of the State, the movie, I decided to take actions into my own hands and seek revenge. Lunchtime, I employed 2 of my finest recruits who were equally as bad at art, and we went on a sabotage mission. Josh, Finn and I waited for everyone to lock up their clay pots and go to lunch. We discreetly waited around the corner for the last person to leave, and then we would strike. My friend Finn was in charge of break-in and lookout duties, whilst Josh and I would inflict the damage. Josh found the key and opened the cabinet. We both started scanning the contents. "I found it," whispered Josh. There was my pot, my masterpiece. Josh started to gently hit the pot, denting the semi-set clay, giving it a somewhat odd shape. Suddenly, like a man possessed, I pushed Josh out of the way, and I punched the pot with a haymaker of epic proportions. I had destroyed it. A shout came from the lookout, "He's coming!" And Josh and I quickly locked up the cabinet and ran out of the door as quickly as possible. Mission complete. Josh, Finn and I innocently strolled in after lunch, waiting to see the look on Tiffany's thieving face. We began to pretend to work on our art, keeping a close eye on the metal cabinets. And then we saw Tiffany had her head in the cabinet for a while and, as if by magic, pulled out a perfectly formed pot. No marks, no dents, nothing. I couldn't believe it. She actually thought she could take another pot and claim it as her own. I was incensed. I was just about to walk over and confront her when the inevitable happened. "What's happened to my pot?" There stood Stephanie.
Oh,
as yet unmentioned Stephanie, with the abomination that Josh and I had created merely moments earlier cradled in her arms. I'd smashed the wrong one. Mr. Brown gave a rigorous interrogation to the class, but none of us came forward to take the blame. We're all on thin ice due to our previously poor artwork, and no one wanted to be sent to German lessons. Despite Mr. Brown's suspicions, no one received any blame or punishment. So I would firstly like to apologise, Father Simon, to Mr. Brown's art class, as they were kept behind and interrogated for quite some time. Despite his comments, I feel I owe Mr. Brown an apology for years of disruption and actively sabotaging the average grade of his students, which probably reflected badly on his teaching skills. I seek forgiveness from Stephanie as I destroyed her artwork and made her give up on a potentially promising career, and I ask forgiveness from Tiffany Jenkinson. As it turned out, she didn't steal my pot. Mr. Brown had used it for a parents' evening display and put it in the wrong cupboard.
Oh.
After all that, the misery and pain has been inflicted by Roger. He suspected it was Tiffany, probably just because she was called Tiffany, I suspect. Anyway, let's see what Sister Rebecca makes of
so many layers to this story.
I know,
but, I mean,
that?
First of all, he was accusing Tiffany of passing off his pot as her own. But hang on, he had been passing off artwork as his own when it wasn't his own. That's a bit hypocritical, number one.
Yes.
Number two, if you really thought that she had taken his pot, why not just confront her? Why go through all this thing of smashing the pot? I don't get it. He should have just said, "That's my pot, give it back. Stop pretending," to the art teacher.
Yes.
That would have been far simpler, I think. I do feel sorry for Stephanie, and also there's nothing wrong with German. So for all those reasons, you're not forgiven.
Okay,
Sorry.
very good. Now, the venerable...
Well, that's it's a cracker, this one, isn't it? This is very good. I agree with pretty well everything Sister Rebecca said.
You just copy what...
I would add. Let me just have a look at what you've written. I would add that no real harm was done anyway.
Yes, it was. Smash the pot.
Mr. More than smash pot.
Stephanie's pot.
Come
she
round
might
to my
have been
flat.
a genius.
Come round to my flat later. There's plenty of smash pots there. Mr. Brown knew something was up anyway, so he wasn't too bothered by it all, and no one was punished anyway, other than going off to do German. And there's nothing wrong with German. So that, yeah, I think on this occasion, on balance, I would say I won't forgive, but it's very, very marginal. Matt.
Hang on, that's my... Don't take over, Dedicate. You've only been on for a few days.
I just wanted to move away from me.
Brother Matt.
Brother Matt, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think, bro?
Thanks there, Alan. I've made my feelings on art students pretty clear in the past. So I'm not really going to deviate too much from that. I do have... My problem, really, is with Mr. Brown. How come Mr. Brown doesn't work out straight away that it's Roger and his mates? Because Roger's the one that's always causing trouble. He's the one that apparently is going to cause Mr. Brown to give up teaching altogether. So why isn't he coming down on him like a ton of bricks from the start? I suggest Mr. Brown's not exactly the brightest tool in the box. Mind you, art teacher. So I'm going to say definitely forgiven, because Mr. Brown couldn't organise whatever in a ding-dong.
Well, really?
There you go.
This one has been sent in from Chris, and on the Radio 2 Facebook page is a very nice kind of graphic representation of this, which is very funny.
As well as our tune,
as well as the tune. I'm going to play the tune again in just a moment.
Really brilliant.
So much going on here. Chris, thank you very much indeed. Father Simon and the faithfully forgiving family. Some 30 years ago, my friends and I quite fancied ourselves as rock stars. We'd formed a small beat combo, and despite our lack of both talent and looks, we'd become relatively well-known quantity on the local pub circuit, sufficient for the drummer to call himself Stix, S-T-I-X, and for the guitarist to have adopted a passion for walking around the town wearing thick white socks over his trousers, just like Haircut 100. Oh, did you?
Man after my own heart. Of course I did.
Did you dress like that?
Yes.
How fantastic.
And the Aaron jumper.
And the Terry Hall hair.
Well, no, that was later.
Oh, OK. Although we were getting some gigs and even attracting the attention of some girls, which was, of course, our main purpose in forming the band, our three-piece sound, we felt, lacked a certain depth. To fill this hole, we decided to engage the services of a keyboard player. Our repertoire consisted mainly of Velvet Underground, Small Faces and Spencer Davis Group songs, alongside some of our own material about how much we'd like to meet girls. The keyboard player that we found, his repertoire consisted of Yes, Genesis, and a note-perfect rendition of sides 1 and 2 of Rick Wakeman's The Myths and Legends of King Arthur and The Knights of the Round Table. Fantastic. He wasn't, therefore, a perfect fit, but it's all we could find. We had taken to rehearsing in the cellar of the guitarist's parents' shop while it was closed. Our rehearsals with the keyboard player were not going well, as he was, and I don't say this lightly, a little bit prog rock. He had written a song, an instrumental actually, called Into the Cave, and I realise we're about to get a bit Dr. Mosh. It told the story of Aphrodite and Thor and their union on an anvil of rock.
Hey! Oh, superb.
And obviously in a cave. At its initial performance, it was 4 minutes of shifting inexplicable chords, but every week it would expand in length and complexity. He was older than us and a proper musician, so we didn't feel we could say no. But after a month, Into the Cave was 11 minutes long and taking up a substantial amount of time in which we could have been practising looking cool and jumping about. Tensions in the cellar were running quite high, and it was at this point we gave him the nickname of Captain Space Cadet. Being young and working hard at looking like a proper band, we would get hungry, and it had become a rehearsal ritual to take a break, sneak upstairs to the shop and make a sandwich. The shop was staffed by some very nice old ladies who kept a well-stocked fridge, and they seemed not to notice the nighttime depletion of their lunchtime combustibles, or even comestibles. Because if it was combustible, it would burst into flame.
Kind of shop.
Exactly. That would be a fireworks shop and a different confession. One fateful night, myself and the guitarist generously volunteered to make snacks for everybody, but Captain Space Cadet insisted we should run through Into the Cave a few more times to iron out the part where it shifted from 4/4 time to 9/4 and then back via a minor fourth modulation.
Oh, wow.
To this day, I have no idea what any of that means. We grumpily consented to try, leading to a tense, protracted hour of further attempts by us to follow what on earth he was doing, and some shouting by him that he wished he knew any proper musicians. Finally, retiring to the kitchen upstairs, myself and the guitarist were ever so slightly miffed. I began making the sandwiches, carefully laying out the bottom slice of freshly cut bread, then some butter, then thin slice of yummy chicken, then some pickle, then the top slice. However, as I approached the pickle stage of this process on the fourth sandwich, the one destined for Captain Space Cadet, the guitarist wordlessly halted my arm. "Use this," he mouthed, handing me a tin of cat food. The sort with gravy and lots of fish. This was, I was told, how Van de Graaff Generator dealt with their keyboard players. We checked the contents and it was perfectly okay for humans, just a little bit fishy, and gravy.
What do you think it said? This is fit for human consumption.
Yeah, it's just a thing. They analysed it there and then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they did. They had a lab, and they went in and then
CSI'd it. Yeah.
We smeared a thin layer of the brown mush onto the top slice and added it to the pile, carefully noting which one was which. Returning to the cellar, we quickly grabbed our own undoctored sandwiches and pushed the remaining cat meat-free snack at Styx the drummer. Captain Space Cadet picked up the first part of his sandwich and took a large, greedy bite. "This is how it goes," he said, showing us his open mouth full of chicken-flavoured cat food. Clutching the world's worst sandwich in one hand, he proceeded to whiz through the notes of Into the Cave, with his other pausing only to grab the second part of his sandwich and wolf that down too. Myself and the guitarist were by this point rolled up double on the floor laughing, but we said nothing. Nor did we say anything the subsequent rehearsal night 3 nights later, when I am ashamed to admit we did exactly the same thing, only with even more cat food. We rehearsed in the cellar with Captain Space Cadet about 3 times a week for 6 months, eventually not bothering to insert even a small morsel of anything nice like actual chicken into his sandwich, just piling it full of cat food of whatever flavour was available and disguising it with whatever condiments the nice old ladies had made available. He never, ever, ever noticed, not even once. Eventually, unable to bear working with him anymore, we persuaded a friends band to steal him from us, and the 3 of us reverted to being a moderately abled, prog rock-free, happy little group. So forgiveness not from Captain Space Cadet, because he deserved it. Also, he seemed to enjoy the cat food snacks, really. But from the nice ladies of the upstairs shop who spent 6 months trying to work out which of the cats had been very, very greedy indeed, resulting in them needing to buy almost twice as much as usual. And from the citizens of southern England for inflicting an 11-minute version of Into the Cave in public bars for a period of 6 months because we were too cowardly to sack Captain Space Cadet. Which is why this piece of music gets an outing. This is King Crimson and cat food. Wow. How about that?
Oh, I say.
And a whole number of you spotted it and recognised it. 1970, this was a single. So as we listen to this, Sister Rebecca, what do you say?
Well, first of all, this proves that cat food tastes okay, I think, unless this guy really had dodgy taste buds. I can't see what they hope to achieve with this. Why didn't they just sack him? I know they were cowardly, but what were they doing?
They
by
were
just
getting
giving him
revenge for Into the Cave.
Getting revenge in their little way.
We should play Into the Cave if it exists for Dr. Morris.
It just seems a bit of an odd way of going around things. You know, personally, I think so. But he didn't notice it, so, I mean, no harm was done,
apparently.
Really. It was just the cat who was seen to be greedy, you know. So, yeah, poor cat. But I think, really, it's just a funny joke and a very funnily written confession. So, Chris, you're completely forgiven.
Thank you very much indeed, Brother Matthew. What do you think?
The best thing about Captain Space Cadet is the fact that he's the keyboard player and he's come up with this great track, Into the Cave, about Thor meeting Aphrodite on an anvil of rock. But it's an instrumental. Oh, are there any other parts? No. It's an instrumental. How long does it go on for? Oh, about 11 minutes. Brilliant. And any parts at all for my guitar? No. Any singing? No singing. Just my keyboard.
Just the magic of
for
the
11
keyboard.
minutes.
Yes.
Brilliant. Outstanding. And for that, I am not going to forgive, because I'm absolutely on the keyboard player's side. Because if you're in that band, you're saying, what do we do for 11 minutes? Go out and have a fag. I'm still only halfway through.
We put a visual representation of tonight's story up on the Radio 2 Facebook page. Standing by then for the People's Verdict on 88291 for Leonard's Confession, Father Simon and the Assembled Collective. I seek forgiveness for a series of unfortunate events that happened to a friend's car. Being a sensible family man, I had a large family-sized estate which he wanted to borrow for a weekend camping trip. In return, he was prepared to let me have his pride and joy. A top-of-the-range German four-wheel drive saloon. After all, he said, you're the only person I would trust to look after it. He was, and still is, Simon, a complete petrolhead, and until now, none the wiser of the following incidents. Following the exchange, he thankfully drove off first, so he didn't hear the massive tyre squeal and see the kangaroo jumps across the car park as I mastered the clutch. However, progressing down the dual carriageway, I started to appreciate the extra power and refinement of such a high-performance vehicle. I stopped for petrol, and that's when it all went wrong. On starting up, a large message came across the dashboard. Oil, it said. O-I-L in large red capital letters. I took this to mean it needed oil. He's a smart lad, is Leonard. He's got that. I pulled across the garage forecourt, purchased oil and poured some in. Now, 10 minutes later, I stalled at some traffic lights, and after restarting, the same neon message appeared. Oil, O-I-L. It's like a text abbreviation. It probably means something else altogether. Thinking that I must be hemorrhaging oil and visions of a seized engine creeping into my mind, I pulled over and put the remainder of the recently purchased oil into the tank. The car seemed more sluggish than it had been, and when I eventually got home, I looked under the car, but couldn't see any leakage. Being a bloke, it was only then that I pulled out the manual. To my horror, I discovered that oil, O-I-L, was the German speak for service due or oil change. But I had overfilled the engine by, well, 5 litres.
Right.
Actually, nicely done. I called a mechanic acquaintance who, after picking himself off the floor with laughter, agreed to drain off some of the offending fluid the next morning. The mechanic didn't work at a swanky dealership, but at a dingy backstreet dive. Quite what my friend would think of his pride and joy being tinkered with here, I would never know. The mechanic wasn't sure how much engine damage would have been done, but advised me to sell or trade in the car as soon as possible. Well, obviously I couldn't do that, and I was starting to feel very guilty. Could things get any worse? I think you know that the answer is yes. Being a Saturday, I shot back home from the dingy dive of a garage and stuffed as much fishing tackle as possible into my friend's saloon and headed off for a jaunty 30-minute drive to my favourite fishing spot. Well, imagine my surprise when I opened the boot of the car, expecting to find my recently purchased gallon of maggots, only to find that at most there was about half a pint left. The bait box had toppled over, and around 7.5 pints of the little wrigglers had escaped into the inner workings of the car.
Oh, fabulous.
I went home and vacuumed the few stray maggots I could see, gave the car a wash, and brim-filled the tank to ease my conscience. Thankfully, Monday came without further issues, and we exchanged our cars back. I even managed to keep a straight face when I innocently mentioned that the service light had come on. My friend thanked me for keeping it in tip-top condition and apologised for the state of my mud-splattered, fuel-empty, crisp-littered estate. We met up a month later. He told me he had had all sorts of bother with the car. Vast swarms of green and blue bottles kept appearing from nowhere.
Oh.
Despite releasing them out of the window whenever it was parked up, they seemed to just reappear from somewhere. He then reminded me about his girlfriend's fly phobia and that their relationship had taken a downward turn after she'd swallowed one whilst driving.
Oh, dear.
The garage thought that some animal may have crawled into the engine bay and died, but they couldn't find anything. My friend wasn't happy with this level of customer service and insisted that they start removing door panels and seats. The garage did pass comment that the oil was remarkably clean, but they changed it in accordance with the service schedule. So, Father Simon, it's now that I want to ask forgiveness from my dear friend who never knew the drama that his pride and joy had been put through over that weekend. In my defence, the hassle the dealership had from my friend was recompensed when he took them up on a favourable trade-in price for his pristine car. So a win-win for both of them, really, I'm sure you'll agree. And as for the fly-swallowing incident, it didn't cause any permanent damage, as my friend and girlfriend married some years later. Yours grovellingly, Leonard, confessing for the first time to his friend who managed to infest his top-of-the-range four-wheel drive German saloon with a gallon of wriggling maggots. Hence the title, Wake Up Maggot. I think I've got something to say to you. Very nice picture of maggots we've got running with this tale. What do you say, Sister Rebecca?
That's an amazing story. I mean, just incredible. I love it. I just, what I don't understand is, was there any long-term damage to the car or not? One would think no, because he didn't notice and the garage didn't say there were any problems.
Well, it was,
so
I suppose, only about a month
damage
later that he flogged it, so...
Yeah, but did he need to because of the damage? Anyway, so I don't think there's any long-term damage to the car. The fly-eating incident is pretty disgusting, actually, and if you've got a phobia about flies, swallowing a blue bottle...
And while driving, because you can't really
That is
do very much,
really
can you?
horrible, actually. But I'm not sure if I was in his position whether I would fess up, because you can't just say, I'm sorry, mate, I tipped a gallon of maggots into your car. So I think I probably would have tried to get away with it as well. So, Leonard, you're forgiven.
There may well be some maggot and fly-based confessions.
Flies.
You never know. Certainly fishing-based confessions. What do you say?
I cannot stand those messages that come up on my dashboard and say, now I need to go for a service. No, you're the car, I'm the owner. I'll decide when we go in for
It's
a
there
service.
to help you, man.
It comes up with a spanner, tells me, oh, I need to go for a service. You had a service 3 months ago. You're not having another one. It drives me nuts. But we often have sort of confessions where you think, do you know what, you should have owned up at the time? But there is not a man jack of us who would have owned up to A, almost ruining your car, and B, decide, oh, and by the way, loads of maggots have crawled into your car and will soon reappear as flies, and your fly-phobic girlfriend will swallow one. Brilliant.
Can I just say, are you really annoyed also when your car says petrol? You need to. You go. I'm not giving you more petrol.
I'm in charge. You are serving me.
Because you do talk to your car, don't you?
I do.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
I do.
Of course, and
yeah.
you argue with it, obviously.
All the time. Yeah.
I was at Burnham Grammar School today, and the head of art came up to me and said,
no.
"By the way, I'm the head of art here. Can you tell Matthew that everything he says about art teachers is wrong?"
Well, I say to you, sir, I shall see you upon the hustings, because I will not back down at all on art teachers.
On the hustings, are you going to stand?
I don't know what I've said now.
And they were this week's confessions. Who did you forgive? You let us know. But most importantly, you tell us your own, and we know you've got something just tucked away there waiting to send to confessions@bbc.co.uk, or you can go to the Drive Time website, bbc.co.uk/radio2. Click on Take Part in the Show. More next week, and don't forget our weekly Mayo podcast, available weekly.